Okay, gonna wait for some more folks to trickle in here.
I gotta say, considering the weather we've just been through, when people were flocking to get inside and out of the heat and humidity, it's quite a change.
Be nice out today.
I feel like fall is maybe officially coming. I've started to see some garden spiders in my garden, the big ones. And I feel like that's always a good sign at the end of the season that things are kind of changing.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's great.
Yeah, I always feel it when the goldenrod starts to bloom. Like, here we go.
Yep. We're sending some farmers to Washington this coming week, and they've just been having atrocious weather in the Northeast. And it looks like we might miss the worst of that. So it's a good sign.
So we'll just give folks just 1 or 2 more minutes as they join. So just a reminder to everybody, like usual, these discussions are live streamed to Facebook, but I'm starting to post them to IFU's YouTube page. So maybe that's a little bit more of a easier platform for you guys to access the recordings and share them. So I'll share that through our email channels as, in the coming weeks, you can find the bank of all the lunch and learns up to then. Erin, I think we can slowly get started with our
Sure.
stuff.
I'll get started by just asking people our trivia question again today. But we'll go ahead and get started. This is the Iowa Farmers Union Lunch and Learn series, and we are so grateful to be joined today by our guests from the Iowa Center for Ag, Safety, and Health. And thank you so much for being with us, Brandi. We're looking forward to our discussion.
You do. I'm glad to be here.
Our trivia question today asks a co-op related question. We're going to be talking about co-ops during the discussion. So we have a co-op related trivia question. And the question asks, what is the oldest continuously operating grain cooperative in the country? What's the oldest continuously operating grain cooperative in the country? Put your answer in or your guess in the chat. Of course, we're proud Iowans on the Iowa Farmers Union. That gives you a little bit of a hint, but give us which co-op is the oldest continuously operating cooperative in the country. But before we go any further, let's do a couple of Farmers Union announcements before we begin our discussion. Christina.
Yeah, I have a couple of things for everyone, and I know Erin will have a couple of things when I'm finished. Most importantly, we want to see you all in person on September 16th. So last week, some of you joined us for our first workshop in our Show Up and Speak Out series. We talked about your why, finding it and why it matters. On September 16th, we're going to be getting together in person for our next workshop celebrating your Farmers Union why, telling the story of us. We'll start with that workshop at 3:30 in Des Moines at Principal Park. And then after that, after about our hour and a half of workshop, we are going to be getting together to enjoy a game at the Cubs. So we're calling it Farmers Union Day at the Iowa Cubs game. So people who join the workshop can join us for free at the game. We'll have an all-you-can-eat barbecue picnic. That'll start at about 5 o'clock. And then after that, we're going to transition to the stands and watch the game together. So we want you to join us for all of those things. You can join either or. I will be putting the link in the chat for that. So September 16th in person, you'll get to see all of us there. Also, I have something to share on my screen. We have a special t-shirt being offered by Ray Gun. Monopolies taste terrible, break up big ag. So you can find this t-shirt, I think, in their stores, Ames, Des Moines. There's a third store. I'll put that in the chat. You can also order it online. So 20% of these sales will benefit the Iowa Farmers Union, and that is all through the month of September. So it's a nice looking shirt. You guys can think about it.
Yeah, it's a great looking shirt. I'm going to get mine as soon as I can. That's great.
Yeah, and Aaron, that's everything I have.
Sure. Well, and we wanted just to remind people about a couple other items. The Iowa Farmers Union will be hosting a Farm Bill Roadshow to talk about all issues related to the Farm Bill. We know that those discussions are hot and heavy right now. We are going to be sending a delegation of farmers next week to Washington to lobby along with farmers from around the country. But this event is going to take place September 28th in Ames. We'll encourage you to come and join us for our Farm Bill Roadshow. We'll be talking about all issues related to Farm Bill and how important that is to family farmers and to our rural communities. So join us there. We'll look forward to seeing you on September 28th. Lastly, I wanted to talk a little bit about some action that's taking place at the Iowa legislature. A panel has been set up to make recommendations for closures and consolidations of several state level panels and committees that are interactions between their advisory panels, their interactions between our state government and the agencies that make up our state government and citizens. And some of these are quite important, and Farmers Union has played a big role in many of these panels, including the Local Food and Farm Program Council, which has just been expanded by the Iowa legislature based on the recommendation of a group led by Secretary of Agriculture Nag and Vice President of Extension from Iowa State University. That's one of those councils that's being recommended for elimination, along with the pesticide applicator peer review panel, the green industry peer review panel, the Organic Advisory Council, the Watershed Planning Advisory Council, and the Leopold Center for Sustainable Agriculture Advisory Board. And many others are being considered for elimination and others for consolidation and merger. These are extremely important to allow our citizens a voice in how state government operates and implements state programs. And the elimination or consolidation that just creates a distance between citizens and their government that is really inappropriate. So we've asked people to make comments during the public comment part of this process. The recommendations made by the committee are going to be brought up to the legislature this coming legislative session. So it's important for people to get involved now. So we've put a link in the chat for you to get involved. So thank you so much for paying attention to this issue. It really is about our government and how it reacts to family farmers and to rural communities. So take time to get involved. But before we go any further today, let's get started in our discussion with Brandi Janssen. Brandi is the clinical assistant professor at the University of Iowa, and she's director of the Iowa Center for Ag Safety and Health. They provided such valuable information for farmers and rural communities about agriculture safety and health issues on a wide range of issues. And today we are going to talk a little bit about recent research regarding agriculture cooperatives and their lesser known role in influencing mental health. And we'll talk about the stress farmers are experiencing, the resources from cooperatives, and the role cooperatives have in promoting farmers' mental health. And before I go any further, I sometimes forget to give the answer to our trivia question. So the answer to our trivia question is co-op related. And we want to let you know that the oldest continuously operating grain co-op in the country is actually in Marcus, Iowa, and it is the Farmers Cooperative Elevator, and it was started in 1887. It was formed by 161 farmers who invested $20 apiece. to build a wooden grain elevator to handle wheat, oats, barley, flax that were grown in area of time. That's considered the oldest continuously operating active co-op elevator in the country. So that's the answer to our trivia question. But before we go any further, Brandi, let's talk a little bit about the work you do at the valuable Center for Ag Safety and Health, and some recent research. Thanks for being with us, Brandi.
Sure. I'm really glad to be here. I have a great deal of respect for the Iowa Farmers Union and the work that you all do. And I appreciate your highlighting the closure of the boards and panels that are being proposed, because I years ago served on as part of there was a board associated with the the State Office of Rural Health that was also eliminated, unfortunately, as part of the process of the reorganization of the Department of Public Health and Health and Human Services. And I learned so much on that board, and I so valued, that we had constituents from across the state, and it really, really was people understanding how state policy affected their lives. And when it went away, it was just a real gap. So I appreciate your advocacy on that issue, among other things, but a long list of things to advocate for in agriculture these days, I think.
That's right.
So I'm really glad to be here. I didn't prepare slides. I wanted to talk a little bit about our center and some research about factors in mental health and their relationships to participation in co-ops, focusing particularly on the dairy industry. And then I hope I have time to answer your questions and to have some conversation, which is always fun. That's the good part. I am based at the University of Iowa, and I do work in the agricultural field. Some people say Iowa State. Nope, I really am at the University of Iowa. And that is where iCache is located. We are a state-funded center. We have state funding from the agriculture budget. We have a line item in the agricultural budget. And our mission is to develop education and prevention programs related to occupational injuries in agriculture. We also collaborate with that other institution that does some work in ag, Iowa State. We are good friends with our colleagues over there, as well as the Department of Health and Human Services, formerly Department of Public Health, and the Department of Agriculture. So we kind of, span some really important agencies and entities in the state. And we're the only currently active center that focuses only on the safety and health of Iowa farmers. So we feel like we fill a really important role. On the occupational side, occupational injuries and fatalities in agriculture are still much higher than the general population. It's an ongoing concern. All of you who are farmers know this as well. You probably have your own stories to tell. I grew up on a farm in the Missouri Ozarks in the 80s. So I certainly have my own stories to tell about practices that could have been better on our farm, things I think back on now and think, oh, wow, maybe we shouldn't have done it that way. But I also grew up in a period where agriculture, like now, was experiencing a bit of a mental health crisis during the farm crisis. That's another space that probably many of us who have farm experience from the 80s have a lot of stories about. So one point I like to make about the mental health concerns in agriculture is this is not an emerging issue. To me, this does not feel like it's new. I feel like we've been dealing with this for many decades in farming. But I will say that I think how we're talking about it is new. The fact that we're talking about it probably is new. And the way that we're thinking really hard in particular about the services side. How do we make sure that farmers have the support they need, counseling services, et cetera. My personal wish, where I like to focus my time, is to think about how does the occupation look, right? We know this is an occupational stress. So if you want to solve this problem, you have to fix the occupation. We know that policy drives a lot of agricultural activity for sure. So I think there is a policy role to play. And I think that there are a lot of questions we could answer. How do things like, how would meaningful farm diversity affect farmer mental health? That's a question I have. How would access to new markets? How would more nimble food systems affect farmer mental health, giving them more autonomy, more decision-making power, and more actual independence from what is right now as you all know, a very large and kind of cumbersome system. So this work focusing on co-ops kind of fits is a little piece of that, and thinking about not necessarily how do we reduce stigma and get farmers to services, although that's super important and I don't want to discount it, but how do we look at the elements of the ag system that could be protective factors, structures that already exist like co-ops, and facilitate that.
Right.
And I should say, please holler and stop me if you have any questions or comments, because I get going and then I just really start talking. So
we'll do that, and we'll encourage our folks to put their questions in the Q&A box, and we'll have a chance to have some interaction, folks. So please put your questions in the Q&A box, and we'll advance the conversation.
Absolutely. So a few years back, I had a PhD student, Yenny Lang, who hailed originally from China and lived for many years in Wisconsin, and actually worked for an organic certifying agency. So she had a lot of experience in alternative ag and organics. And then she came to our program to get a PhD in occupational and environmental health. So she gets credit for really leading the research I'm going to talk about today, because she came in thinking about co-ops in particular. She worked a bit with Hmong farmers in Minnesota and in Wisconsin, and their sort of cooperative growing structures. And she came in with a real interest in sort of what, how do basically alternative economic structures help, improve farmers' all kinds of outcomes. Does it, improve health? Does it reduce injury risks? And then really the meat of her work focused on what are the effects of related to mental health. So she, all of us, we together, a research team published a couple of papers focusing on dairy co-ops and how participating in dairy co-ops might affect farmers' mental health. And this was really, when you're a professor and you're working with a student, you say, go search the literature and see what you find. And she searched and searched, and I tell you, nobody's really looking at this before. So she made a really important contribution to the literature in this work. And so, but that also meant that she didn't have a lot of things to compare it to. So she started with a qualitative project, interviewing farmers and participants in co-ops and asking them kind of their perceptions about what worked well in co-ops, what were the benefits of those cooperative structures, and how did people interact with them. And in particular, it won't be surprising that, the issue of maintaining financial well-being came up often as a way that participating in a co-op essentially made farmers' lives a little easier, reduced stress, helped them, understand the markets, and helped with marketing and that sort of thing. And so that financial stability was a big piece. Interestingly, there were some differences in size of co-ops. So those elements that farmers indicated were particularly helpful to them were really focused on smaller co-ops, and large co-ops, which they sort of perceived as just a consolidation outcome that comes, and is a bit deviant from the democratically controlled and profit sharing principles of co-ops, were less protective from their perspective. They were less helpful in those ways. So that really got her started in thinking about, that kind of work helps you understand how folks interact with the co-ops. This is very preliminary work, I would say, both of these papers, but it helps us kind of get us started to think about where there might be access points or protective structures or factors in these co-op organizations. So after she did the interviews, then she designed a pretty comprehensive survey, and she used some existing, we found there are a number of stress scales and depression and anxiety scales that are well validated, that we know tell us something about how someone is feeling. And she designed her own because, as we said, there was not a lot of literature on this. So we worked together to put together a survey about co-op interactions. So how do you use your co-op? What kind of things do you do? Do you serve on the board? Is it just a social activity, or do you use the services, that sort of thing, and start to try to link factors related to mental health with the different elements of the co-op structures.
Mm-hmm.
And here we started to find some interesting things that I hope we, or some enterprising young researcher, can continue this kind of work. But co-op participants reported fewer symptoms of stress and depression than non-co-op participants, and that The difference, at least for perceived stress, was statistically significant, which we like in science, that statistical significance. But even if
Yeah.
it's not significant, it still tells you something. So it's still important. The concepts of quality of co-op relationships were more important than quantity. So what that means is those farmers who reported that they felt like the services they received were very high quality, or were, very well executed, they reported sort of better stress outcomes, if you will, than those who just did a lot of stuff, but didn't say, no, this isn't particularly good, but I do all these things. So it's really about, which shouldn't surprise us either, but it's really about the quality of the services they receive. If they participate in, say, co-op leadership, is it truly democratic leadership, right? Or is it just in name only? Those things seem to have a difference, right? So it's not just being in the co-op, it's also getting a good experience from that, the co-op relationship. So the two pieces that were really seem to have the most protective factors were the extent to which farmers reported program satisfaction. So the things that they engaged in that they felt were high quality and were well done. And also those elements that provided social support. So of course, there's always a social element to these things, right? You're a part of a board or a group or a committee. And so you also kind of have that social engagement, which is a protective factor. And we know that even though there's not a lot of research in this specific area, we know that that's consistent with other research in mental health, that social support, a structure of that, where people feel welcome and that they belong there, can be really protective. In addition to those very important and very tangible financial services, and recognition that the co-op itself is kind of helping you get a better deal in agriculture, which is a key piece of it. So this was these were really interesting projects to be part of. I will say that the one challenge with the survey project was that we were running it just as COVID hit. Yes. Yeah. So I always have to think about where were we in time. So, with any study results, we say, well, here is kind of the limiting factors maybe about this. And one of them was certainly that as we moved into COVID, man, all bets were off in terms of how people were feeling about things. And we recognize that. But I think there's enough potential here, for future research and thinking, not just in the dairy industry, but other grain and other cooperative, could be food hubs, any number of cooperative structures in agriculture, and think about really concretely the ways that those organizations give farmers the choice that they want, helps them to diversify, provides a social support, maybe financial support, all of those things. And, helps, get away from sort of the centralized food system that we're all kind of in the midst of, right? It gives farmers some choice and some empowerment, which is not always what they have in the big industry.
Well, and Brandi, the statistics show us that consolidation in the food system is at an all-time high. I mean, and it's continuing to grow in the wrong direction. So it's not an issue that's going away anytime soon. And dealing with the social impacts of that and the mental health aspects of that, we can't ignore. We can't afford to ignore those things. So this is very informative research for us.
Yeah, well, thank you. Yeah, we had a wonderful. It was just Jenny did a great job, and it was really a pleasure to get to sort of be in a supporting role in this kind of work and push a student toward great work.
Yeah. So it sounded like we had two things that really impacted how this impacts farmers' mental health and their mental stress issues. And one of them is program satisfaction, and one is including making sure that the social support, the welcoming and the engagement part is not ignored. Give some good examples of those types of things that you like to point to as saying, hey, those things really made a difference in how people dealt with it.
Yeah. I mean, the social support was more general. The quality of programming was certainly tied to, how do I say this? I guess like depth of participation.
Mm.
That you participate in something and you feel like when you're doing so, it conforms to those democratic principles that co-ops are supposed to be about, and it gives you some, what we would call agency. You have some power in doing that. So that was one element of the satisfaction. It wasn't just surface level; it was really meaningful for people, and I think that's an important, kind of lesson for co-ops when they think about their organizational structure and how, the members of the co-op need to be meaningfully empowered, not just sit on a committee that then nobody else listens to and you go on and do something else. So I think that, and to me, that feels very consistent with what we know with mental, occupational stress in general, and sort of lack of autonomy as one driver of occupational stress. So if you feel like you're in a workplace and you can't voice your concern, expertise in an area, and it's not taken seriously, those are all potential stressors. And I think that's very consistent with the ag industry. Many farmers is that we have this idea that farmers are independent, and they are really constrained, and they don't have a lot of autonomy sometimes in the kind of basic decisions about what makes sense to grow this or that, because they're sort of constrained by the resources you have available, the policies that support it, or whatever else. So I think that that the depth and quality of those of the participation is a big piece for me.
Interesting. Well, and you mentioned that the factors that impact farmers' mental health sometimes are impacted by the scope of the co-op. We have all sorts of co-ops, some that are very, very hands-on and small in size, but mighty in impact. And we have some co-ops that have consolidated along with the rest of agriculture, and those issues and the impact that they have on mental health make a real difference, whether you're dealing with the scope of the co-op as well.
Yeah, I agree. It's interesting and an important piece, and it just sort of speaks to quality and depth of relationships, not just the surface coverage or being a co-op kind of in name only.
Sure. And our farmers have to deal with co-op merger issues all the time. So when they talk about the impact of losing a local voice in their farmer-owned business, it's not just sentiment. It actually has a real impact on farmers' mental well-being as well as their economic well-being.
Right. Yeah. And the fabric of the community too, when you think about, that's another way I sometimes think maybe next steps of this research could also look more at a rural community overall, and where do co-ops fit in there, and how do they kind of support the whole rural fabric.
Yeah. And that's kind of what I wanted to ask you about, where you think the next steps with this research might go. And that seems like a very important one.
Yeah, it's one that would definitely, as someone who I'm trained as an anthropologist, so I like to think kind of at that community level. That's one that I think would be a good next step. But I also think just testing, especially since we did the work of developing this survey in comparison with the mental health measures, thinking about other industries, other agricultural industries, and their relationships to co-ops, so grain and get some kind of comparison across the scope of ag. One thing we didn't ask farmers was about participation in multiple types of co-ops. And that would be an interesting way to look at it too, and sort of kind of think about how their experience might be different based on maybe the commodity that the co-op focuses on, or whatever, that kind of a thing. So yeah, any research project, really all you get is a bunch more questions. That's definitely true. So there's a lot stewing around in there.
Good questions for us to explore. So Brandi, tell us again how to get in touch with you. People are looking for more information and how to learn more about the center.
You are welcome to email me anytime. I think my email is somewhere in the chat. I can pop it back in there as well. Or maybe Christina will if she has a minute. You can email me at my UI. Oh, there, perfect. just like magic, it came up. And all of the resources that our center produces are available to print on your own if you like, or let me know and we will send some things out to you. We do a series of seasonal campaigns. 4 times a year, we send safety and health resources to every extension office and every FSA office in the state. And some of those have focused on mental health. So we have developed a number of products. One is sort of a crisis resource brochure that I know our Farm Service Agency folks use and keep on hand if as needed, as well as other kind of, one thing I want to do more than just give people a phone number to call. It does feel like but it's a challenge, right? We have a whole state to cover and we're a small center. So kind of, thinking about reminding people that they're not alone, to, stay connected and to talk to others. Our colleagues at Iowa State are doing a great job of doing mental health first aid, and QPR, question, persuade, refer trainings, which are suicide prevention trainings across the state. We also have a project right now. We'll run a few sessions of this in the upcoming year, a curriculum for mental health providers to help them understand what agriculture looks like. So if you have a farmer come into your office and you don't know anything about their job, how can you be a little more informed, ask better questions so they feel maybe more comfortable? Because we know people don't know a lot about farming. We know that farmers are actually a really small group, and not a lot of people anymore grew up on farms or have spent a lot of time on farms. So we want to help make the support structure, right? The mental health providers who are out there in communities kind of nuts and bolts. What are the stressors in farming, and what do finances sort of look like, and what's an okay question to ask? How do you ask somebody about their farm in a way that is sort of polite? Because there are some rules about this, we all know, right? You don't just ask how many acres somebody's got, that's impolite. So some of those kind of basic cultural competencies in agriculture that we want our mental health providers to know. So those are some of our projects. And like I say, we have a lot on our website, and we're happy to talk more about them or send some to you if you like, or you're welcome to print them and use them however you like as well.
Well, we will look forward to that, because those are really valuable tools for us. And we often focus on farmer mental health when the markets go bad, right? I mean, and that is an extremely stressful time. Of course it is. But something for our folks to also remember is it's not only the prices that make a difference, it's the level of autonomy that you talked about that we know is a real issue for farmers and agriculture, and continues to be an issue whether prices go up or down. The trend for autonomy is not headed in the right direction. We know that really has a big impact on mental health. So it's something for us to keep working on. And these are great resources. So thank you for sharing with us, and thank you for being with us today.
Yeah, well, thank you all for all that you do. I'm going to go buy one of those t-shirts too.
They're hot sellers. That's right. And there's one just down the road from you, right? And I was saying,
exactly.
That's great. Well, thank you again, Brandi. This has been a wonderful conversation, and it's just the start of the conversation.
Great. Thanks so much. Take care, everybody.
Thanks again, Brandi, and thank you everyone for being part of the Iowa Farmers Union Lunch and Learn. This is a weekly outreach and education program that we put on with the wonderful help of our staff. Christina Dexter always does a fantastic job of putting these programs together. And our other staff, Deborah Bunka and Tommy Hexter, are instrumental in bringing all these programs to you as part of the Iowa Farmers Union. We are a nonprofit, nonpartisan organization that works on behalf of family farmers, sustainable agriculture, and thriving rural communities. So thank you for being a member. If you haven't had a chance to be a member yet, sign up today. We would really love to have you as a member as we move ahead. So again, Brandi, thank you so much for being with us. And Christina, thank you for everything. So everyone have a good day.
Thanks, everyone. Bye.
Bye.